Act and other economic
Biden and the Democrats' inflation. And why do we have this? It's because last March they decided they needed to spend an awful lot of taxpayer money in our economy. And we said, hey, this is going to raise costs for everybody, and it has. So you fast forward to where we are now, the Democrats are at it again, trying to raise taxes and increase government spending at a time of high inflation and a time of recession. A 40-year high of inflation. And a lot of that we know is related to energy, which is what we're here to talk about today, the specific impacts of what the Democrats are going to try to do, and it's going to raise energy costs for the American families. Joe Biden's trying to take a little victory lap now, saying that the price at the pump isn't as sky high as it was earlier. So much of inflation is related to energy. And what we know is the price of gas today at the pump is still $2 a gallon more than it was when Joe Biden took office. So there has been a bit of a decrease in demand because people can't afford to drive at $5 a gallon for gasoline. They've had to change the way they live, they drive, they work. All of those things have had to be changed. And what we hear from folks that look at this is that the average family has spent over $1,500 in the past year for energy, higher than they had the year before, all as a result of the policies of Joe Biden and this administration. People know what they want. They want energy that it's affordable, available, and reliable. And we know that the country is already looking at the fact that we may face blackouts as the summer progresses. The experts have said about 2/3 of the country is going to be subject to blackouts. But that doesn't seem to stop the Democrats who want to raise taxes on American energy, as well as in energy that we import from overseas. They actually have in this bill a fee on every barrel of oil that is imported, billions in dollars of increased taxes which will be going to the paying at the pump. And remember, this is Joe Biden who just a year ago at the Glasgow Climate Summit in Scotland went and asked Vladimir Putin to produce more Russian oil and send to the United States. He went to Iran from oil, Venezuela from oil, and just went hat in hand to Saudi Arabia saying, send us more. That will all be taxed at a higher rate, taxing every barrel more than ever before. Oh, and they've indexed it to inflation. So at a time when we have 9.1% inflation, Joe Biden and the Democrats want to put a tax that's growing at the rate of inflation, which is going to make inflation worse. That's what these folks are up to. So the pain at the pump is going to get worse. And it's not just on the cost of energy to drive your car. It's also the energy to heat your home, energy that powers our country, energy for electricity. So Joe Manchin has agreed to something that the folks in West Virginia and in Wyoming said, Joe Manchin, what the heck are you thinking? And it has to do with coal. And that's how we have this here. Coal associations on the Manchin-Schumer bill. This is from the West Virginia Coal Association, Joe Manchin's home state. Why support anything Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, or John Kerry want for coal? That's what the people of West Virginia are asking their Senator Joe Manchin. Why? It is incomprehensible, they say, why any miner would support the Manchin-Schumer legislation. So that's the impact of folks at home that Joe Manchin apparently is not paying attention to at all. So what's the money going to be used for? Well, there's the climate slush funds. There's the sorts of things that Joe Biden ought to be familiar with, because when he was vice president, there was a thing called Solyndra. Wasted government money. Many of these projects, and they're going to be loaded into this bill as well under the grand title of One Big Climate Slush Fund. And then there's all these subsidies for electric vehicles. And for rich people for electric vehicles, you can make up to $300,000 a year for a family. Full subsidy. Electric vehicles costing $80,000, $7,500 subsidy. I mean, that's what we're looking at here. At a time when the families of this country are hurting, inflation is eating into people's paychecks. People are very concerned about their future. And even if wages are going up a little, they're falling further and further behind the families of America are each month as Joe Biden's been president, because costs have gone up so high. The Democrats are going to make it worse if they're able to pass this reckless tax and spending bill. Senator Thune.
Thanks, John. One of the things that we continue to point out, I think, as you know, and Senator Graham had asked for, and Senator Crapo, information from the Joint Committee on Taxation, Congressional Budget Office, and the inflation numbers came out yesterday, or at least the estimate of what the inflation numbers will be by the CBO, and calculated that there would be no discernible beneficial impact on inflation as a result of passing this massive tax and spending bill, which the Democrats have argued all along is going to reduce inflation. Not going to be the case. But one of the biggest areas that we've seen in terms of inflation in this country is in the cost of energy. 40% when it comes to gas utility services, gas prices, gasoline prices still at $4 a gallon, and or higher in places around this country. And all of the taxes in this bill, much of it is going to be geared and oriented toward increasing the cost of energy. $60 billion on domestic oil and gas production. If you look at the tax on imported oil included in there, there are taxes that just run through this entire bill, all targeting domestic energy production in this country, and then also, as I said, taxing imported oil as well. What's that going to be used for? Well, $60 billion for environmental justice grants. What does that mean? The American people are going to be trying to figure this out if and when it passes. And then $1.9 billion for canopy coverage in urban areas. I'm sure that's something that's on the hearts and minds of every American. $30 billion in a climate slush fund that can be used for Democrat favorite projects. The point is, this is a big tax increase on job creators in this country that isn't going to do anything to address the inflation crisis in this country and the economic recession that we're already in. What it will do is spend a lot of money on things in this country that are not a priority for the American people when they're experiencing 4-decade high inflation and gas prices that continue to hurt their pocketbooks on a daily basis. I'm a big supporter of renewable energy. Our state of South Dakota leads the way when it comes to renewable energy, but this is not the way to address an energy crisis in this country, and that is to put these massive taxes on domestic energy production. The American people deserve better. We're going to do everything we can, as I've said before, to defeat this bill, and we'll be offering a lot of amendments designed to target these specific areas of the bill.
Well, America's going to be like this room, hot, if we keep doing this. So, here's what I think. I think it's more likely the Taliban didn't know that Zarqawi was in Kabul than this lowers inflation. And why do I say that? It takes a lot of time to keep girls out of school, measure beards, and make sure no ankles showing on a burqa. So maybe they were just busy. The one thing I can tell you about this bill, it will not lower inflation. The same people who said the American Rescue Plan would rescue you have thrown you back into the water. We're raising gas taxes in the name of lowering inflation. He goes to Saudi Arabia to beg the Saudis to produce more foreign oil, and the response in this bill is to introduce a new tax on imported oil. In 1995, when I first came up here, one of the first things the Republicans did is repeal the excise tax on foreign imported oil because it hurts the consumer. It was at 9.7 cents. So this is a vampire tax. It comes back from the dead. But now it's at 16.4. Not only did they bring back a tax on oil in this bill that they used to have in 95, it's higher than it was in 95. So tell me how that lowers gas prices. So you don't have to believe me or any of us. The Congressional Budget Office, the gold standard, according to Senator Manchin, has said in 2022, negligible effect on inflation. In 2023, it could go up or down inflation by 0.1%. That's the CBO. Wharton says it doesn't reduce inflation, and Joe used to hail them. So who are we going to believe? The people who have looked at this or the same people who brought you the American Rescue Plan? I would just say this to my Democratic colleagues. To Manchin and Sinema, thank you for holding the line on the Senate filibuster. Thank you for doing some things to make America a less radical place. But you are going to be held accountable by your voters on this issue. The Democratic Party has one play, tax and spend. You show me a group of Democrats in any room in America and they're thinking about ways to increase your taxes and spend your money, and it is not working. So I would conclude with this. On the foreign policy front, the Biden administration is dumb and weak. They're undercutting a bill I have with Senator Menendez to help Taiwan more because they don't want to provoke China. We withdrew from Afghanistan less than a year ago. And now we know the leader of al-Qaeda was staying in a house owned by the #2 guy in the Taliban government. We have a border that Mayorkas says is secure, I say is incredibly broken. The bottom line is, folks, we live in dangerous times economically and foreign policy-wise. And every policy choice they're making, they delayed helping the Ukraine before the invasion. They delayed sanctions on Putin because they didn't want to be provocative. They're trying to back me and Menendez down and helping Taiwan because they don't want to provoke China. And when it comes to domestic difficulties, they're passing a bill will make it less likely people will invest in factories and equipment. The 15% minimum tax, according to CBO, disincentivizes investment in factories and equipment and capital expenditures. Gas prices will go down dramatically because the economy is coming to a halt. We're in a recession. This is going to make it worse. To Senator Manchin, they're supposed to pay you back on the continuing resolution. You're supposed to get some things on permitting reform that maybe I'll like. You're supposed to get some special deal for some pipeline in West Virginia on the continuing resolution to fund the government. I will not vote for a continuing resolution that is part of a political payback scheme. I will come up with ideas for South Carolina to help our energy needs And if you put my provision on the CR, I'll vote for yours. Every senator should come up with provisions that would help their state, and ask our Democratic friends, when it comes to the continuing resolution, let all boats rise. If they won't do that, we should have a continuing resolution that's clean. So, Senator Manchin, if you think you're going to get 60 votes to get the sweeteners that can't be done in reconciliation, you need to think long and hard about what you're doing.
Well, Senator Graham put me down as a no on the continuing resolution as well.
You get some for Kansas.
Well, I think I'm a no on it right now. And you're right, that it's in the DNA of Democrats to tax and spend. Absolutely in their DNA. And I believe the people of Kansas have been talking to the people in Dr. Barrasso's state of Wyoming. When I go back home, the people I'm closest to, my family, my friends, my high school classmates, they put their face in their hands and they ask me, what the hell is Joe Biden doing? What the hell is Joe Biden doing? And then they ask me tougher questions. They ask, why does Joe Biden insist on throwing gasoline on this inflation fire? Why does he want to destroy our jobs? I think we all realize that this raising taxes on corporations is going to destroy manufacturing jobs. Let's take this home. Wichita, Kansas is the aerospace capital of the world. We make small jets, small airplanes. Across the state, we have a lot of small agriculture manufacturing companies. They make discs and tractors. And I think of Landau Trailers up in Marysville, Kansas, the best specialty trailer in the world that they make. And how they're going to lose jobs because of this tax. Why? This is what Kansans ask me. Why the hell does Joe Biden want to drive prices up, make the price of gasoline higher, our utilities go up? Why does he want to destroy this economy? And then they ask me a tough question. Why would we give special tax breaks to one industry, the chip industry, but then we drive other companies out of the United States? It's so hypocritical. You know, I don't have answers to these questions. But I do have an assessment. Joe Biden is reactionary. His administration is reactionary. Whether it's national security or economic policy, he's never proactive. He creates a crisis and then he solves it with more crisis. It's a compounding of stupid decisions. Here's one in this legislation. They're going to double the number of IRS agents. Wow. They're going to double the number of IRS agents. I want everyone to pay their fair share of taxes, but let me tell you who's going to feel the brunt of that. It's going to be small businesses and hard-working Americans. This is what happens. When you get an audit, you've done everything perfect, but you're going to spend $5,000 or $10,000 to defend that audit, assuming that you win. And that would be a very small business, any type of business size at all. You're going to spend $20,000 or $30,000 to defend that audit. How does that help our economy? Here's one, and I want to talk about prescription drugs just for a second. How do they think that taking monies from supposed Medicare savings and using it to subsidize wealthy Americans' ACA plans is fair? How does that make sense? If you're going to take money from Medicare savings, shouldn't it go back into Medicare? Don't we have a Medicare solvency problems? How asinine thought process do we have here? Why do they want us to destroy the innovations that pharma has given us that saved millions in lives? I'm going to talk about hepatitis C just for a second, and Dr. Cassidy should talk more about this than I should. But when Dr. Cassidy, Dr. Brasso, and I were in medical school, residency, practicing, it was a death sentence. Hepatitis C was a death sentence. You would spend, I bet, at least $1 million on every patient going in and out of the ICU. If we could find a liver for him, it's a $500,000 transplant. And Bill, I don't know, was it 10 years ago we had the first hepatitis C drug, 7 years ago?
Yeah, más o menos.
And my gosh, it was really expensive, $80,000. And I don't know what it was worth.
18 years ago.
18 years ago, an $80,000 drug. You would take it for 8 weeks and it would save someone's life and avoid that $1 million of expenditures. But here today, we have competition. There's competition in the market. The drug price is now a fraction of this. Think about Alzheimer's just a second. This nation spends over $300 billion a year on Alzheimer's. You want me to drive the healthcare expense for this country down? We can't do it through tax and spend policies up here. It's going to take American innovation from pharma. I cannot drive the cost of caring for Alzheimer's patients down unless we have a miracle drug. And the legislation they have before us is going to delay or, if not altogether, stop that innovation, that drug that may be 3 years away, it may be 10 years away. I would challenge any press person in the audience. Talk to some venture capital people right now that invest in pharma. I'm talking to them. They're telling me they're shutting it down. They're not going to invest in high-risk innovation if there's not an opportunity. But I also want you to know there's something that we're for. I do want to drive prescription drug prices down. We know how to do that. There's going to be an op-ed today in Fox News that we wrote about driving the prescription drug prices down. One final point on that. The list prices are going less than inflation the past several years, but the out-of-pocket prices are going up. Would love to discuss that at another press conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Roger. I'm a former, or still consider myself a hepatologist, which means you treat liver disease, so it kind of warms my heart to hear him talk about liver disease. But it doesn't warm the heart of my constituents to talk about inflation. One of my constituents said that President Biden should come live where real people live. If their prescription for high fuel prices is that someone drives an electric vehicle, they have no understanding of the lives of those people whom I represent. Folks don't drive 15-year-old pickup trucks because they don't want a new car. They can't drive they don't drive new cars because they can't afford a new car. And high gas prices has made it even worse. High utility prices, high grocery prices. So inflation has hit them. So when the title comes out, the Inflation Reduction Act, of course, everybody's encouraged. Except, as previously noted, the Wharton School of Business says that it actually increases inflation for the couple of years. The CBO says it has a negligible effect one way or the other on inflation. Bottom line, it does not decrease inflation. In fact, I go back to that current inflation state we're in. Remember the American Rescue Plan passed on a partisan basis. I now call that the American Recession Plan. And this could be the American Recession Plan 2.0. And if it does drive us into a recession, it will decrease inflation because people won't have the income by which to pay for that which they have to buy. Now, by the way, why do I say that? Well, 50% of the book value tax is on manufacturers. We are in an international jobs war. Countries around the world, particularly China, are subsidizing manufacturers to move there, and they subsidize them in a variety of ways. I would love to be pure, free market, my gosh, let's get government out of everything. And we're losing the jobs war. And Congress saw that we were losing the jobs war and began giving credits, like we did in the CHIPS bill, for manufacturers to return. Now, the left is looking at this and saying, those manufacturers, we've had an increased number of manufacturing jobs. It's been going pretty well. They've been taking care of that which Congress has used to incentivize them to come back and to hire more Americans. But we don't like that. We're going to pay more. We're going to make them pay more. Now, the National Association of Manufacturers says that it will kill 200,000 jobs here in the U.S. CBO says it will decrease investment in manufacturing. If you want to lose a manufacturing war, this is what you do. But if you want to win, you don't do it. And I would say that Republicans want to win that, and this bill shows that Democrats wish to lose. Let me mention one more thing not commented on yet, the climate impact. Now, the bill says that they are going to reduce emissions since 2005 by 40%. Now, what they don't tell you, now that has not been independently verified. One organization said it's more like 35%. What they don't tell you is that we've already reduced emissions since 2005 by 17%. We're halfway to their goal. Under current law, we're scheduled to reduce emissions to 34% by 2030. So we're almost there, and the improvement is marginal. But they're only speaking about U.S. emissions, not global emissions. And so since initially, at least, they're going to be driving manufacturing in Asia, particularly China, to be producing the batteries and other things that come here for their EVs, we could have global greenhouse gas emissions get worse. Now, if they really want to tout the climate benefits, then they should come clean as to what their analysis is and why are they not also including the increased emissions that will occur in other countries because of this policy. There's more we could talk about, but perhaps you have questions, so I yield. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Some Democrats say that Republicans should vote for this package if they care about deficit reduction.
You want to look at
Would Republicans support this package if it didn't have any new government spending and it just addressed deficit reduction? And then I have a second question.
I'm sure others would have comments, but let me point out that they say that we're reduced by $200 billion. Okay, our economy, that's about 0.8 to 1.2 of our nation's GDP every year. They're going to reduce that over 10 years. It is going to be less than a fraction of 0.04% of our 0.04%, roughly 0.08 of our nation's GDP. What's that?
If things go perfect.
If things go perfectly. Now, and then the debt and deficit, this will be a total rounding error. So if that's what they're using to justify, and if that's their strongest argument, it's a pretty weak, strong argument.
And my follow-up is, do you think Democrats truly care about reducing the deficit, or this is a way to justify billions in new government spending for things that they want?
I don't think they care, and I think they're only trying to get a fig leaf to justify billions of new spending. John?
Lindsay has a...
Yeah, so this is an important question. The deficit saving estimate is down to $100 billion, I think over a 10-year period. See, the gimmicks in Build Back Better were exposed, and that's why they lost Manchin. The House claimed Build Back Better cost $1.7 trillion. I asked CBO, if you took all the gimmicks out, if you made the child tax credit for 10 years, not 2, which we know it would be, about every new program they introduced was limited to 2 or 3 years, which was a lie. If you play it out over 10 years, the actual cost of the bill was $5.9 trillion. When it came to adding to the deficit, they said it was $238 billion. Well, when you do away with all the gimmicks, the deficit went almost to $3 trillion. In this bill, there's a gimmick here. They have a limit on the Obamacare subsidy. Now, the Obamacare subsidy in this bill goes up to families of 4 making $304,000. So if they take money away from Medicare to give a subsidy to a family making $300,000, well, that program is supposed to go away in 3 years. It's not going to go away. If you play it out over 10 years, this adds to the deficit.
Senator Graham, can you walk through your vote-a-rama strategy, Senator Thune, in terms of...
I'll let him do that.
Okay. Where do you see any real efforts?
Well, I'll turn it over to John.
Scuttle the bill, and how long do you see?
Okay, so here's where I'm at. Okay, I vote for the gun legislation, thinking that we ought to do some things to keep guns out of the hands of unstable people. A lot of people on my side didn't agree, but it made sense to me. I voted for the infrastructure bill. As Build Back Better was a disaster, it made sense to me. I think you voted for it, right? So I've tried to work with them where I can. I voted for the CHIPS bill. It was far more expensive than it should have been because I think we need to make chips here, not just rely on foreign chip manufacturers, and you make a good point. I get all that. Before the ink is dry on that bill, they drop this. So what will Vote-A-Rama be like? It'll be like hell. They deserve this. As much as I admire Joe Manchin and Sinema for standing up to the radical left at times, they're empowering legislation that will make the average person's life more difficult at a time they can't afford higher gas taxes. They're going to get it. At a time we create jobs, it's going to be harder because the incentives to do so are gone. So I'm hoping that we can come up with proposals that will make sense to a few of them, and they will abandon this jihad their own to tax and spend. But I just turn it over to John now, but to Joe Manchin, you have a game plan that counts on something you need to really think long and hard about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot to add to that. I think that these votes are going to be hard votes for the Democrats, and I think the question for both Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema is, if any of these amendments succeed at the end, will you or will you not vote for the wraparound amendment? Because they both said that they won't vote after they felt like in the American Rescue Plan they voted for a wraparound amendment and felt like they were misled by their leadership at the time that they would never vote for one of those again. So if we have some success with amendments through this process, and we will be targeting certain areas of the bill. The question is, at the end, are those amendments going to be amendments that actually might change the bill, could make it better, might make it harder to pass in the House, who knows? But we've got a series of amendments, and they aren't going to be easy. But I think we kind of expected the Democrats to fall in because, as has been pointed out by my colleagues here, that it's an article of faith with Democrats that when they have power, they're going to raise taxes, they're going to spend money, and they're going to grow government. I mean, that's what they do, and they did that last year, and they're going to try and do it again right now. But we're obviously going to make those votes hard votes.
It almost sounds as though that there's like a red line that you feel that they've crossed. Senator Graham, you talked about them working with them on these other issues, but when it comes down to these two senators, it almost sounds like they crossed you personally. You use the word jihad. This is pretty strong.
Well, all I'm saying is, listen, okay, the American Rescue Plan took you on a functioning ship and put you in a lifeboat. Okay, this Inflation Reduction Act throws you out of the lifeboat. I mean, to the point I'm trying to make to my colleagues, we work well together on things that make sense. You're the same people that told us the American Rescue Plan would save us all. It gave us a 40-year high in inflation and a recession. So to Manchin and Sinema, I admire you at times and I oppose you now. And I think what you're doing is that you're empowering the most radical people in this country to tax and spend at a time we can ill afford it. You're making it harder to get out of recession that we're in. You're going to increase gas prices, not lower them. And I think they need to be held accountable, and I intend to do that.
Senator Graham, Senator, all of you, I think, have said that we're in a recession. Today, the Labor Department said that in July we had 500,000 jobs, unemployment rate to 3.5%, as low as it's ever been. How is that consistent with the economy being in a recession right now?
The definition of a recession is negative GDP growth in 2 successive orders. Now, yes, we've got strong job growth. Isn't that great? Housing market is beginning to decline sharply. You speak to realtors, they say these interest rates are having an incredible impact. Now, I think housing is like 25% of the construction of the labor market. And by the way, when we speak of jobs, we're not talking about government bureaucrats. Some of them have been zooming from home since the pandemic started, and we don't know when they're coming back. We're talking about working Americans who typically work in manufacturing, construction, or in mining. Now, this bill goes after manufacturing. We've already spoke about half of these taxes going on manufacturers, and CBO's saying that will decrease investment in new manufacturing facilities. But construction will also go down. Interest rates correlate. So, my gosh, isn't it great? I'm very pleased that we've got strong job growth. But we're in a recession. And it doesn't take much to look forward and to see that for those Americans who rely upon, those Americans who are most susceptible to the jobs war we are apparently the Democrats are trying to lose for us, are in construction, manufacturing, and mining, we could lose those.
Yeah. And if a Republican were in charge, you wouldn't be asking that question. We'd be in a recession. So there's a common theme here. We had the lowest illegal crossings in December right after the election of 2020. In history, we got the highest with no end in sight. The Taliban were not in charge when Trump left. They're in charge today. Contrary to what the Taliban telling you, they're working with al-Qaeda. Now you've got the highest gas prices in maybe forever. You got a 40-year inflation spike. You think this is an accident? Do you think they're just really unlucky? Their policies are not working, and they're doubling down on policies that don't work. Go to South Carolina and tell somebody this is not a recessionary economy. Finally, to jobs. If you're able-bodied and you don't have a job in South Carolina, I can get you one by midnight. People can't find workers.
I want to make one quick point on the recession. Recession to me is when I go back home and the community bankers say, hey, Doc, what's going on? You know, business is slowing down. Why are people afraid to invest? When people in the energy sector say, we're afraid to invest monies because of your president's policies. when folks that I know that invest money for a living, when they want to grow their jobs, my natural network, who I spent the last 25 years with, were entrepreneurs, people that love the business of doing business. And they all tell me they're scared to death to invest under this current environment.
It's always good when people are working. I did note in the numbers that came out this morning that the labor force participation rate had dropped, which is, of course, a concern. And if you talk to families, they are having a harder and harder time keeping up. Because even if they're working, even if they got a bit of a raise, the raise has not kept up with the cost of inflation. And families in this country, in spite of what the president may have said, are falling further and further behind, and it's harder and harder to just keep up with where they were, certainly when he became president of the United States.
Back to the vote-a-rama, are there any specific topics or amendments that you think put the Democrats in a tough spot, something on immigration, foreign policy, China,
Energy, inflation, the border, and crime? Expect to see amendments on all of those things. Thanks so much for being here.
All right, folks, thank you so much for joining us here at Golden State Times for this Republican press conference talking about different issues from inflation to recession. I have told everybody exactly what's happening. Now, for those that watch the fake news on TV, you are 2 months behind. Recession didn't start on July the 28th. It started on June the 1st. At the end of May. So you are 2 months behind if you watch OAN, CNN, if you do watch that. If you watch Newsmax or Fox, you're 2 months late. I have told that to every single person. Once we actually hit severe recession, going into a depression pretty much, you will still be 2 months late. Unless you watch Golden State Times that keeps you up to date on everything that is going on, then you are up to date. But if you watch TV of any kind, Fox News, OAN, CNN, ABC, NBC, Newsmax, or anything else, then you will always be 2 months late. Thank you so much for joining us here at Golden State Times. The only update and warning that I have given in the last 48 hours is regarding Kansas. So if you know that someone that lives in Kansas, or you yourself live in Kansas, my biggest suggestion is get out of there, and as soon as possible. ASAP. Get out of that state ASAP. But again, this is just a warning for whoever listens. If you don't listen and you live in Kansas, then just note that I gave you that warning. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you on the next one. My name is Jen Goldstein. Thank you so much for joining us, both for the White House press briefing and for this Senate Republican press conference. And I will see you guys on the next one. We're continuing coverage on our website, goldenstatetimes.com. Again, that's www.goldenstatetimes.com. Thank you so much, folks, and we will see you on the next one. Don't never, ever forget, God is in control. Jesus is King of Kings. And I will see you bright and early Monday morning for more coverage. But we're continuing our coverage on our website, goldenstatetimes.com.